Hey everybody, welcome back to Coach Hall Writes. In today's video, we're going to be talking about some tips for the upcoming digital version of the AP Lang exam. So in case you didn't hear, in 2024, this is the last year for a paper version of the test. Some schools are going to be taking the exam digitally, and next year in 2025, everyone will be taking the exam digitally. So let's talk about some tips for the upcoming AP Lang digital exam. Before we get started, let's be sure to stay in touch. Make sure that you are subscribed here on YouTube with those notifications turned on. And also, if you're a TikTok user, please be sure to follow Coach Hall Writes over on TikTok as well. In this video, you're going to learn the benefits of the digital test. We're also going to talk about some MCQ and FRQ tips. When it was first announced that the AP Lang exam would be all digital in 2025, I know there were some teachers and some students who were a little bit stressed about it. But here are some of the benefits of this format. First of all, it's more efficient. If you have ever taken an AP exam with the paper version, you know that there are cellophane wrappers and stickers. It's like a whole process to open the test booklets. So that part won't happen with the digital exam. Also, because it's digital, you'll be clicking, not bubbling in answers. And so for some students, this will save them some time, especially if they're super meticulous with their bubbling. Now, all you have to do is just click. I have a teacher friend whose school administered the digital exams last year, and she said that the breaks were smoother in between the MCQ and FRQ portions. So I'm not exactly sure how it's that much smoother, but I'll take her word for it. So I added that to the list of benefits as well. For many students, typed essays are easier to edit as opposed to a handwritten essay. And as a teacher and AP reader, most of the time typed essays are also easier to read. Now, one of the things that my students always complain about when they have to write 3 FRQs back to back is that it hurts their hand, especially by the third essay. And so I'm sure typing is not necessarily the most comfortable, but you might have fewer hand cramps if you are not having to handwrite 3 essays. And this last benefit won't apply to everybody, but for many students, they can actually type more quickly than they can write by hand. And so in some sense, this might benefit them during the test as well. Some additional benefits are that the typed FRQs are more like the writing and editing process in college. I'm sure there are some professors who still give a handwritten essay as an exam or as an assignment, but let's be honest. Most of the assignments in college are typed, and so since AP is like a college class, typed FRQs on the exam are more similar to the college experience. With the digital exam, there's a side-by-side view, so you're not having to flip through multiple pages. In some sense, I think this will also help to streamline the test-taking process. And lastly, the testing platform is going to be Blue Book. If you've taken the digital SAT, chances are you are already familiar with Blue Book. But basically, if you are familiar with AP Classroom and you have found it a little bit difficult to navigate multiple choice or even the FRQs on that platform, it's not the same as what you'll encounter test day. So AP Classroom is not the same as Blue Book. And from what I've heard from students who have used Blue Book, as well as teachers who have used Blue Book, overall, it is a very easy testing platform to use. And so I think that's a benefit. Now, as far as the benefits for the digital MCQs, there's a timer on the screen. Now, if you do not like to see how much time is left and you don't like a ticking clock, you can hide it. But I would consider this a benefit because I have had students tell me that depending on where they sat in the testing room, they couldn't necessarily see the clock very clearly, or perhaps it was difficult to read the clock because maybe it wasn't the type of clock they were used to reading. And so for these reasons, it can be nice to have a timer that is right on your screen. But again, you can hide it if you don't want to see it. There are also different shortcut keys. I don't have all of them listed here, but if you're the type of person who likes to use different shortcuts and you're taking the digital exam, it might be worth knowing what those shortcut keys are and how to use them effectively. Now, to be clear, I don't think everybody needs to know these shortcut keys, but for some students who are more used to that, it might help them. Now, one of the major benefits of the digital MCQs is that the lines or paragraph referenced in the question will be highlighted. So for instance, if the question says something about lines 55 to 57, that's going to be highlighted in the passage. So I think in that sense, there is an advantage for the digital exam versus the paper test. Now, just as a general test taking tip, just because it references lines, let's say 55 to 57, doesn't mean that that's where the answer actually is. So for those types of questions, whether you're taking the digital exam or the paper exam, make sure that you are actually reading the surrounding sentences as well, because there's usually a context clue. One of the major concerns when the AP Lang exam first went digital was that students were not able to skip ahead to other MCQ questions. So you had to answer it and then you couldn't go back. Well, that has since changed. And so you can navigate within the section of the digital exam, meaning if you're on the MCQ, you can access the MCQ. You can't move ahead to the essays, but in that sense, it is more similar to one of the benefits of the paper test. Because on the paper test, you can go back and forth between passages. Also on the digital exam, you can flag questions and go back to them. So let's say you guess on one and you want to go back and look at it more closely. You can flag that question and that will allow you to navigate more quickly as you're trying to go through the digital exam. Now, one possible downfall of a digital exam is that for those who like to use their pencil on a paper test to trace under the lines or the words to kind of keep your place in a text, that can be harder to do when you're using a device because it's basically propped up in front of you, not on a table like a paper test is. So I would say if you're really used to using your pencil to keep your place, you might want to practice with some digital tests. Like for instance, you could just take a PDF online and practice reading that. There's definitely different ways to get used to digital passages for sure. Now let's talk about the FRQs. These are the essays. So you have 3 of them: synthesis, rhetorical analysis, and argument. So you can indent your paragraphs, but be careful with the tab key. This is pretty common for multiple test taking platforms. Sometimes if you hit the tab key too many times, it can cause a glitch. There's usually an indent button, so I would use that and not the tab key. Another solution would be to just hit enter twice between paragraphs. So if they're all left aligned, if you make sure there's space between the paragraphs, it still makes it easy for the person reading your paper to distinguish your different paragraphs. Also, one of the benefits of the digital FRQ is that you can bold or italicize words. I would do this sparingly and make sure that you're only doing it in a meaningful way, but technically that is an advantage over the paper test. Now, one of the possible downfalls of the digital exam might be that annotating is going to look different, but there are ways to annotate digitally. For instance, you can highlight the passages typically, and also if you're the type of person who likes to take notes and outline before you write your essay, you can technically type those notes in the box and then you can just delete that before you submit if you want to. And whether it's the digital test or the paper test, if there are extra notes in front of or at the end of a student's essay, those are not factored into their score. Now, something that is important to know for this year is that you're not going to be able to copy the passage. I've heard different things about this regarding last year's test. I have heard some students indicate that they could copy the passage last year. I've also heard some students say they couldn't. My students took the paper test last year, so I'm not sure which one is accurate, but I have had some students reach out on social media and offer some test taking tips. And so I wanted to let you know that from what I've been told, this year you're not going to be able to copy the passage. So you will need to, as you're looking for quotes, make sure that you actually type them out. It's not going to be as simple as Control-C to copy. And also, I know a lot of us are used to autocorrect when we're texting or typing, and there is no autocorrect as far as I've been told on Blue Book. And so you want to make sure that you are proofreading, because sometimes when we're typing quickly, we are more prone to typos. Also, we're human and they happen. Now, to be clear, spelling and grammar, while important, usually do not factor into your score. And that's for the digital test and the paper test, because quite frankly, as long as we can read your essay, you're good to go. So the occasional typo here and there, or the occasional subject-verb agreement issue or sentence fragment is not going to affect your score as long as we can read your essay, because we view these essays as a rough draft. So if you're stressing about spelling, It's okay. All right, there you have it. Those are my top tips that I've been told by teachers and students who took the digital exam last year. If you happen to have any suggestions because you've taken or administered a digital AP exam, let us know those tips in the comments. Or if there's any tips I've forgotten, please let me know in the comments as well. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, happy writing!